Mom.
Stop talking.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Welcome, and thank you for coming to the Ask the Experts Living with ALS. My name is Giovanna D'Angelo, Director of Special Events for the ALS Association Golden West Chapter. We have a great program for you today that we know you will find very informative, discuss an important aspect, introduce the dedicated staff that is here from the Golden West Chapter. We have Fred Fisher, our President and CEO, who's in the back. He will be speaking shortly. We have Cheryl Goldstein, our Director of Development. We have Julie Hemmett, our Regional Director of Signature Events. And not here today is Madeline Thompson, who's our Director of Care Services and the Hawaii Care Manager. And then a special thank you to Jenica Lancey, our Director of Marketing and Communication. She has put a lot of effort this week in securing media, TV, and radio interviews to spread the word about this event and also about our Walk to Defeat ALS that's taking place tomorrow. So thank you, Jenica. The program format this afternoon will be as follows. Each speaker will make a 20-minute presentation with a 10-minute Q&A. Please note that we will need to allow for some time for questions from our internet viewers if we have any. There will be a break at 3:35 p.m. to 3:45 p.m., a 10-minute break, which will allow you the opportunity to go to the restroom, to have a little snack, a bite to eat, and also to visit our vendors that are in the back. And of course, please stop by the chapter booth because there's lots of informative information there that you may want to take home with you. So, and then the program will reconvene again at 3:45 p.m. for the second session, which will bring you an update on research. So I would like to begin right now with our first presenter. Victoria Nohea Nakahiki is an advisory trustee for the ALS Association Golden West Chapter. She serves as the chair for this year's Hawaii Walk to Defeat ALS, which is the first annual Walk to Defeat ALS. Nohea and her children, Max and Mahia, did I pronounce that? Yes, okay. Along with their family, will be walking in.
As far as medical care and services go, there is so much information that you're going to take away from this educational seminar today, and I'm just very thankful that you're all here. I also wanted to introduce my children who are here with me today. My son just flew in from Hilo, Mahealani and Max, and we have Will. Being here on the eve of our walk, starting off with this Ask the Experts is just a wonderful way to put this whole weekend together for our family on a personal level. This wonderful seminar that we have today is an outreach to the medical community, to our ALS community, to family and friends. Our walk tomorrow puts it all together. The money that we fundraise tomorrow, the awareness that we've created throughout the few months that we've been trying to get the community to come together and help rally behind our efforts to get this walk off the ground, comes together tomorrow. We've already reached our fundraising goal, Dr. Miles, and we're surpassing it. So our dream will become a reality to establish and develop a proven, Fred can say this way better than me, and I know he's going to say it.
I'm going to be talking to the next one.
Well, but I just have to say it. It's a research-proven system of support and care that we are going to bring to Hawaii. You're going to learn a lot about that system today. And then tomorrow, it all comes together with the walk and the fundraising and the awareness and everyone who's coming out, and it all just brings it home together. And then resulting from that It's just going to be wonderful. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I hope to see all of you at the walk tomorrow. I also hope that you continue the support for all of the patients that are here with us today and the families, medical, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Miles. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. Everyone who's here today has a big role and a big part in making this happen for our community, our ALS community. So thank you again for being here. At this time, I would now like to introduce you to a very, very, very special person, not only to the ALS Association and the Hawaii ALS patients and families and community, but to our family personally. And this is the CEO and President of the ALS Association Golden West Chapter, Fred Fisher.
Okay, so let them hear you out on the internet. When I say aloha, you say aloha. Now they can hear you. I drive this by clicking. Let's see if this works. Works. So the ALS Association, our basic mission is to drive great patient care, public policy efforts that benefit people with ALS and their families, as well as driving money into ALS research. Our mission is to lead the fight to treat and cure ALS through global research, nationwide advocacy, while empowering people with Lou Gehrig's to live fuller lives by providing them with compassionate care and support. Our vision is that we've managed to cure ALS in animals. It just hasn't translated very well into people. And so the cure for ALS is not going to be found in a laboratory. It's going to be found in a person with ALS. It's going to be found in people participating in clinical trials. That's where we're going to be. So we have to start thinking about ALS research and the cure for ALS as not just about being something that happens in a laboratory somewhere. It happens in your community. It happens in your clinic. It happens with you, because you will be the ones that prove that it works. So now that we know where it will be found, how will it be found? This is a very hard question. How are we going to find the cure for ALS? Well, for me, it starts with a circle, which of course, at the top of the circle for us, for the ALS Association, at all times, our focus is on the people and the families who are struggling with ALS. And those families have a voice. Even if they've lost the ability to speak, they still have a way to use their voice to create awareness about ALS. Awareness locally, awareness nationally. NOHEA has come with us to Washington, D.C. to lobby Congress, to ask for research funding, to ask for support for patients. Veterans get ALS twice as often as everybody else. It was veterans and non-veterans alike with ALS going with their families to Capitol Hill and telling their story to their congressional representative. That changed the VA for service, full service-connected disability. That changed Medicare. That created $85 million a year in ALS research funding. It wasn't me doing that. To Congress, my story doesn't matter so much. Your story matters. So patients and families telling their story is what drives enormous resources back into the ALS community. Government funding, enormous resources. So far, over $1 billion of benefit to the ALS community has been created by people with ALS and their families coming with us to Washington, D.C. Not to tell my story, you telling your story. That's created billions of dollars. Some of that money ends up in ALS research labs. And you're going to be hearing more later on today about that. And those labs are conducting all kinds of science. And you'll hear all about the different kinds of science that we're funding through those efforts. When they come up with something that they need to try, they don't invite people to go to a lab somewhere to try the drugs. The laboratories come to us. They come to our clinics. They come to where the patients and families are, where people are prepared to raise their hand and say, I will let you experiment on me. I want to be part of the search for a cure. So ALS clinics play a key part in the research process. And the reason they play a key part is because that's where the patients are. And the cycle keeps going. I clicked and I shouldn't have, but what's happened so far is those patients who are in those trials come back to Congress and they say, hey, we're getting some things done, but we haven't found an effective treatment yet. We haven't found a cure yet. We need more money. Congress appropriates the money. It goes to the labs. They do more research. They try on more patients. Oops, not working yet. They go back to Congress. So that's why it's a circle. And it's a circle that starts and ends with all of you. So here's what the association offers. Some of you may have seen this before. This is the way it feels. Research happens someplace, the clinic happens someplace, but the chapter does in people's homes happens someplace else. They're in silos. And when you operate in silos, you really miss the opportunity. And since now you understand, we don't see ourselves as being involved in separate silos. We see ourselves in being part of one system. And why is the one system so important? This was not my idea. Clinical researchers wondered, do people who go to multidisciplinary clinics do any better than people who don't? If people have a robust model of care where you bring all those disciplines together, is it any better? Well, it turns out that if you go to a multidisciplinary clinic, you're going to live 7.5 months longer. Now, out of a prognosis of 2 to 5 years, 7.5 months, that's a long time. Particularly, does anybody know how much effect you get from Reliotech? Couple of months. In fact, that was just proven again through the latest clinical trial that we'll talk a little later. The latest clinical trial for ALS, dexpramipexole, was a drug lots of people were excited about. There was lots of promise and hope. It didn't work, but it proved two very interesting things. Number one, it proved that Riluzole extends life by about 2 months. Good to know. It also proved that the placebo effect is real, because the only population of people in that trial that got better are people who weren't taking the drug. And so it validated the efficacy of Riluzole, and it validated what is a very challenging concept for many of us. Why do we have double-blind trials for ALS? Such a horrible disease, shouldn't everybody be getting the drug? And this trial proved why the research community doesn't do that, because some people end up seeming better, and it would be easy to credit the drug with that. So not only do you live 7.5 months longer, 1-year mortality was decreased almost 30%. Prognosis of bulbar onset patients was extended by 9.6 months. Now, if you get 2 months on Riluzole, and you get 9.5, 10 months on clinical care, we're helping people live 3 times longer than the only FDA-approved drug. To me, that seems like a really good idea. That's what we should be doing while we're working hard toward an effective treatment and cure. Patients who received their care at a multidisciplinary clinic had a better prognosis, and active and aggressive management enhances survival. That's what we're about. So here you see the ALS Association and our chapter and the services that we have on the left. and what a typical multidisciplinary ALS clinic looks like on the right. And the challenge sometimes is if these groups aren't working together, which is why you see that big wall between them, if they're not working together, people who are newly diagnosed, sometimes they diagnose themselves and they Google and they find ALS and they come to the chapter and they find us. Or sometimes they'll end up having it happen through their doctor. But if you don't have a way to connect all the resources in the community together, who misses out? Who loses? The patients lose. And so what we did was we created this integrated patient care model with a collaborative intake process that takes the wall down and instead creates a multidisciplinary team that doesn't just include the medical services, but it includes the community support services. And when those people harness their energy and work together on behalf of people with ALS, really good things happen. So what happens to the lack of service integration? This is one of my favorite slides, just by the way. Hold your applause. It's our model of optimal patient and family care and the pathway to a cure. So when you put the pieces together, again, this is what's going on in California. You capture the synergy of interdisciplinary complementary services to provide the best possible care programs. NOHEA has been terrific about introducing us to the local legislature, and she met with Senator Inouye when he was in office to talk about the needs of the people in Hawaii. We created a state tax checkoff program where people could check on their state tax return to give money to ALS research. That has raised over $500,000 in California for ALS research. May is ALS Awareness Month. In 2012, the Golden West chapter raised $1.5 million designated for research, and chapter constituent advocacy efforts, writing letters to their members of Congress and their local state legislatures, generates $85 million a year. Who are we, and how do you know we are worth listening to? How do you know we're worth giving money to? Why trust us? So this is one that's exciting for us. In 2013, we were designated by Charity Navigator, which is the largest nonprofit independent evaluator in the country. And the most number of stars you can get from Charity Navigator is 4. Only 1 in 4 charities in the country, if that's for me, tell them I'm busy. Only 1 in 4 charities in the country, all those nonprofits in the country that are evaluated by Charity Navigator, only 1 in 4 are 4-star charities. And this is why. It's because we invest an extraordinary amount back into the services we deliver for our mission, and we are transparent in terms of how we spend the money and where the money goes. And our board of directors, of which NOHEA is an advisory trustee, is very engaged in making sure that we deliver on our promise to the ALS community. There's only one ALS charity in the world that's received this designation. Any guess on which one it was? One ALS charity in the world. Okay, let's say in the country, because who knows if Charity Navigator is in France or wherever. Only one in the country has earned this 4-star distinction, and it's us. So we're here to help. We're here to build your ALS community. We're here to leverage the strengths that are here. We're here to leverage the services that are being provided and see what part we can play in making life better for people with ALS and engaging you all in the search for a cure. Thank you very much. Totally missed it. So, question? Do I have time for a question?
You have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Seriously?
Yes.
I did that in the mouth clock. I never. What questions can I answer now? And it doesn't have to be now. I'll be around later. I'll be back up here a little later on, and I'll be around all night. So. Yes. Tell me your name.
Well, my name is Grady Hunter, and what are the symptoms of ALS?
Well, you know, I'm going to let Dr. Miles talk more about that because he's a physician and I am not. So you'll be covering that in your talk because he will do a much better job of it than I will, and I'll just embarrass myself in front of him, and I'd rather save face for that. Anything else? Okay, well, it's not your last chance, and my cards are out on the table, so if you think of a question later on, or you think of a question next week, grab one of my cards on the way out. It has my telephone number, it has my email address, and simply drop me a line, say hello, ask your question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll call someone like Dr. Miles who does and get it for you. Thank you very much. So now come the big words. It's my privilege to introduce you to Dr. Miles, who's a board-certified neuromuscular specialist and director of the Neuroscience Education program here at Queens Medical Center, Neuroscience Institute. Dr. Miles.
Does that help or someone can? How is that? Is that better?
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. All right, so before we start, I have an audience response system that we'll be using. And I want you guys to participate in this because it's going to be a lot more interesting and if we get folks participating. And to do this, you'll need a cell phone. It doesn't have to be your cell phone. You can use a cell phone with someone next to you. Or if you're not able to use a cell phone, have someone else type in the answers for you. But it'll be, I think, a lot more interesting if folks participate. You're going to text your answers. They're going to be one-letter answers to that number there, area code 808-679-1565. If there's people watching on the web, you can do this too. You don't have to be here. So again, that's 808-679-1565. There we go. Aloha.
Aloha.
I'm Doug Miles. I'm a neuromuscular specialist here at the Queens Medical Center. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And I'm hoping that we can provide you with the information that you're looking for. I'm going to talk a bit about the role of multidisciplinary care in ALS. And a lot of what I'm going to say is going to overlap and be very similar to what Fred just said. So let's try this audience response system here. Let me ask each of you, what is your interest in ALS? A, I have ALS. B, I think I might have ALS. C, a friend or family member has or had ALS. D, I provide health care or other services to people who have ALS. Or E, I just want to learn more, or I'm here for the poo-poos. Is made up of 100 billion specialized cells called neurons. And each neuron is like a little computer. And it connects with other neurons, with hundreds or thousands of other neurons. And they're all connected together like some vast computer network. Many of these neurons have very specific jobs. And in a part of the brain called the primary motor cortex, neurons there are in charge of movement. We call them upper motor neurons. When you want to move a muscle, an upper motor neuron sends an electrical signal down a long wire-like process, and that process makes its way down the spinal cord, eventually reaching another set of neurons in the appropriate level of the spinal cord. Then they relay that command signal to these lower motor neurons. The lower motor neuron then transmits that signal to muscle fibers, telling them to contract. And that's how we move. Now, some diseases cause damage to lower motor neurons. And when that happens, muscles get weak. They may twitch or fasciculate. They atrophy, get smaller. Other diseases cause damage to upper motor neurons, resulting in weakness or spasticity or abnormal reflexes. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a disease that over time destroys both upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons, while sparing other cells in the nervous system. And that's why we call ALS motor neuron disease. Because motor neurons, those nerve cells, those neurons that turn our desire to move into physical motion, are the primary target of this disease. All right, so let's see. Let's see what folks said. What's the best way to do this? Where's my mouse? Is this on? What page is on there? There, you see it? Okay. So we got some responses. A couple of you here have ALS. Many of you have friends or family members who have ALS. Some of us work with people who have ALS, and some of you are just here for the booze. And how do we get back here? All right. All right. So here's another question for you. Which symptom or symptoms have you or a loved one with ALS had? And you can answer more than one time, but if you answer more than one time, every time you hit a letter, hit send. So you hit A, then send, then B, then send. So A, trouble swallowing or trouble eating. B, drooling or thick secretions, what we call sialorrhea. Depression or anxiety, that would be C. D, trouble with emotional control. Or E, trouble sleeping. So if you've had one or more of those symptoms, or someone you know or love that has had ALS has had more than one of those symptoms, go ahead and text each one individually. A, then B, then C, and so forth. And we'll see what people said in a moment. So we said that ALS is a disease of those neurons that make us move. If that's the case, if this is simply a disease of motor weakness that progresses with time, well, maybe it's adequate if we just focus. And then some patients, not all of them, but some subset, develop dementia. And then there's coping. We all know that this is a horrible disease. It is inexorably progressive, and we don't have a treatment for it. We don't have a cure for it. And then there's end-of-life issues. And of course, quality of life, comfort. These are all things that folks with ALS and their families have to deal with. This is more than just a disease of weakness. You might even say that these are multidisciplinary problems, and you need many disciplines to come together and solve them. All right, so of these symptoms, are there any that folks have had? Still getting some answers coming in? All right. So, A, trouble swallowing or trouble eating. A lot of folks have had that. B, sialorrhea or thick secretions. A lot of folks have had that. Depression, also pretty common. Trouble with emotional control. Well, that's also pretty common. And then E, trouble sleeping, not as common as the others, but folks are having. So, multiple symptoms. You were asking about symptoms. These are some of the symptoms that folks are complaining of. And I'm sure there's other issues that folks would tell you about too. So, another question for you. If you have ALS, or someone you know and love has had ALS, which three of these are most important to you? So again, type in one answer, hit send, type in another answer, hit send. Up to 3 answers this time. A, maintaining mobility. B, improving communication. C, assistive devices or durable medical equipment. D, home health assistance. Or E, getting riluzole, one medication that actually makes a difference in terms of longevity in this disorder. So there's there's a lot of needs that people have when they have ALS that are related to the symptoms. You know, to maintain mobility, first, folks might need a cane, and later might need a walker, and later might need a wheelchair. A lot of folks need assistance with their activities of daily living, bathing, dressing. Some folks need assistance with transportation. If you've got 9 different doctor visits this month, you need some way of getting there. And once you get to the parking lot, you need to get to the clinic. Home health aides. A lot of things are a lot easier if there's someone there to help you out. A hospital bed. This is a request I get a lot. Tools to assist with communication, which I think Katherine Krammer will be talking about a little bit later. Other assistive devices or durable medical equipment. A desire to participate in research trials. I hear this one a lot too. Okay, I know there's no cure for ALS yet, but can I be part of the research? Is there something that I can do to be part of the trial? Either because I might be part of that arm of that one trial where they do find an effective treatment, or just so I can do something to help cure this disease. And riluzole, that's a frequent need too. And then finally, feeding tubes or peg tubes, a way to supplement nutrition. And then devices to assist with breathing, like non-invasive ventilation or a CPAP mask to help folks sleep at night or just to help improve respiration. So again, multidisciplinary problems. Well, if we've got all these problems that involve multiple disciplines, again, rather than having someone go to 9 different places in 1 month, we can bring them all to one place. And this is the idea behind the multidisciplinary approach, to create a clinic where the patient can have as many of his or her clinical needs taken care of in one visit as possible, a one-stop shop, as it were. So this is one. So let's answer this one. You guys have already sent in your answers. If you have ALS or know someone who has ALS, which 3 of these are important to you? There we go. All right. There we go. So maintaining mobility, all right? For some folks, that's most important. Improving communication, also hugely important. Assistive devices, okay, important. To a lot of folks, but not as much as the first 2. Home health assistance, another big concern. Getting your riluzole. Not one person said that was one of their 3 most important things. So the one thing that research has produced that can extend life is not among people's most important concerns. And frankly, that's what I see when I have patients with ALS. It's like, okay, do you want the riluzole? We offer the riluzole. It's not people's most important concern. So when the one drug that extends life is not as important as getting home health aides or communication, or other things that affect quality of life. That should tell you a little bit about the quality of life and about this disease. All right. So another question for you. I promise there won't be many more. What has been the biggest challenge specific to Kama'aina with ALS? So specific to folks who live in Hawaii. What makes it more challenging for us? Is it A, finding knowledgeable providers? Just one answer this time. B, getting assistance or assistive devices? C, finding social support? D, finding physical, occupational, or speech therapists? Or E, something else? If it's something else, after you type in E, go ahead and text whatever it is. It won't show up here, but at least we'll have some idea what it is that people view as their biggest challenge. All right. Okay, so multidisciplinary care is great in theory. But in medical science, the only way to know if one treatment is better than another is to compare it to other treatment under similar circumstances. And there have been about 4 studies that have tried to answer this specific question. Now, these cryptic references that I've got up here, these are the names of the lead author and the journal in which the article appeared. And each one of these took a slightly different approach to the question. So the first one, by Traynor in 2003, what they did is they looked at median survival. How long did people survive after diagnosis? And they had 82 patients who were in multidisciplinary clinics versus 262 in general neurology clinics. So a fairly large study. What they found was that in the multidisciplinary clinics, more folks got prescribed riluzole. They survived longer, 7.5 months longer. And the odds of still being alive after a year were about a third higher. Okay, that sounds pretty impressive. It is. Now, it's not a perfect study. There was some bias. The group that had the multidisciplinary care, they all started younger. And they were more likely to get riluzole, both of which might have affected their final outcome. But it still looks like a pretty impressive result. What do the other studies say? So Vandenberg, a study that was done in the Netherlands in 2005, their endpoints were a little different. Rather than looking at longevity, they're looking at quality of life. They used a couple tools called the short form health survey and visual analog scales. They had 133 patients in one arm, the ALS clinic arm, and 75 patients in their general clinic arm. And what they found was that if you're in an ALS, so not a completely negative result. So altogether, if we look at all the data, your quality of life is likely to be better. Your survival time is likely to be better. And your odds of being alive a year later is likely to be better if you're in the multidisciplinary care. That's just from having that convenience of having all your caregivers in one place at the same time. And that makes this much impact. All right, so here's the answers to the last question that we had. All right. What do y'all think is the biggest challenge specific to folks in Hawaii with ALS? A couple of you said finding knowledgeable providers. No one really thought that getting assistance or assistive devices was significant. Only one person said finding social support, and then those were the only responses. Let's see if that's accurate. Okay. Well, no, there's some more answers that came in. So actually, most folks said that finding knowledgeable providers was the biggest challenge, and well, hopefully that can be changed. All right. So from my own personal experience working with patients with ALS, patients do seem to prefer the multidisciplinary model. When I've been in a general neurology clinic and referred patients out to a multidisciplinary clinic, they're often referred back to me because the multidisciplinary clinic was far away. But they came back and they were better for it, and they benefited from the referral. That's about all I have to say. Are there any questions?
Yes, I think we have a question from the website, okay? From someone, okay. Why do you think in this day that it is so hard to get more support from insurance companies for multidisciplinary clinics? Why aren't there more when they save lives? And this is coming from a viewer in San Rafael, California.
I don't know the specific answer to that, except that the way the healthcare system has been set up has been to have one visit and then get referred to another visit and referred to another visit. I suppose if you're going to see your doctor, and you're not just going to assume that your doctor's going to refer you to 5 other people. And so if you're automatically seeing a bunch of other care providers in one visit, well, maybe the insurance companies are recoiling from that. I suspect that might be part of the impetus behind the research, is to show, look, this really does make a difference. It extends life, it changes quality of life. Because if you show that argument to the insurance companies, hopefully that position will change.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, why are all the studies from overseas and not from doctors here?
Boy, I wish I had a good answer for that.
Because not only you refer, you go to ALS seminar around the country. Like I listen to a lot of webcasts.
That's some research that's being planned for sometime next year, maybe?
Well, I think I'm going to defer to Fred with the research question. Right now, I'm just starting in the outpatient realm here in Hawaii, so I don't have patients who are involved in research at this time. Hopefully, in the future, that's something that we can do. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So your evidence is showing that the multidisciplinary team approach works. So is it a standard protocol for the neurologist to refer all these, refer their patients to all these specialists, even though it's going to be kind of a piecemeal approach? But nevertheless, will you automatically order a PT assessment, OT assessment, a dietitian assessment? Because I know those type of services will be reimbursed by the insurance.
I think that's fairly common. And when I worked in a setting where I wasn't in a multidisciplinary clinic, that would be something that I would do, is make sure that my patients got referral to PT or to OT or to speech therapy. And I think that most neurologists would do the same.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, sir.
I read online about stem cell therapy in a hospital in China, and then the results are very positive. And they're not embryonic stem cells, adult stem cells, and they actually use your stem cells from their bone marrow.
Well, again, I'll defer to Fred with the discussion on the research, and hopefully he'll touch on that. So I would like to introduce a woman who has worked with ALS patients for her entire career, and was involved in augmentative communication from days of cardboard lists of words and pictures through the evolution of more technological options. So, Katherine Krammer, welcome.
Hello? Let me start by saying, what do we do? Sometimes we're the little mystery profession. The speech language swallowing pathologist, what we do is we evaluate speech and language, and thinking skills, voice skills, of course eating, and then we look at augmenting communication when communication becomes difficult. We also do the therapy and the training, for swallowing and communication, and again, the augmentative communication, and you're going to see some of that today. And in addition, we coordinate and consult not only with the patients, but their family, friends come into the clinic, absolutely, the doctors, the vendors, the PTs, the OTs, the social worker. So we're the communication hub of the patient care. So we're busybodies and we're involved with everybody. So what do we do? So when you come to us, and we prefer, if possible, that people can get to us sooner rather than later, so we can work with you on anticipating some of the problems that may occur and get things in place so they don't have to become problems. But if the problem has occurred, we're really good at working with that too and trying to back up the clock a bit and making sure you better function. So what do we do? Well, we talk a lot with you folks about what is the present, the prior problems or with speech and voice and language, what's going on with the mouth, the voice, the breathing. Have there been any problems with learning or any previous accidents that may have damaged the brain that we need to know about? Of course, today we always look at computer literacy skills. That's very important. Do you have them and what are they? And we sit you down at the keyboard and see if you can do typing or work with the mouse. And then, of course, we also look at, do you speak English or another language? Because our technology today, we are able to have it done in pretty much most languages. I don't think Tibetan yet, yeah? Okay, so we'll work on that. We also look at how do people manage their frustrations and what are their attitudes about what's happening to them and about technology. Then we look at the motor function, not only of the mouth and the face, but also the hands, the shoulders, the body, how you sit, if you can stand, because that's important when we're looking at communication technology. Then we also address the environments. We have many of our ALS people are still working. And it's important to know that and what those working environments are like and how we can keep people working. And then we look at the caregivers, the unsung heroes. What are their abilities? It's very nice if we have a fancy computer machine that the patient can use, but if the family can't use it, we have some training to do and something to consider. And we look at the comfort level with the things that we're suggesting. So the goals we have, of course, are to develop and teach something that is going to be the most rapidly learned and flexible and effective program with the optimum outcome. How about that for a mouthful? We're great at customizing. So we customize what needs to occur for both the patient and the family, and to keep on eating as long as possible safely. And even if they do get a PEG tube, we do have programs that do help people keep eating along with that. The goal is eating, that's pleasure. But I want to move to the communication part. One of the questions I always hear when people come into the office is, how can you make my speech better? I want to make my speech better. I want it as loud as it was before. I want it as clear as it was before. I want to have exercises. And one of the things we talk about is that little issue called fatigue. And we talk about how if I give you the same kind of exercises I give somebody who has a stroke, you've just used up a whole lot of muscle energy doing exercises. What do you have left for eating and speaking? So we have to look at how to make your speaking more clear, because we always want you talking. That's the number one thing. Keep on talking. And so we'll talk to you about techniques to make sure that you're aware of where you need to focus with placing your tongue, or that you need to face people listening to you, and that people can read what you're saying, because quite frankly, 60% to 90% of all communication is nonverbal. You like that? How cheap does that make verbal? So we really need that facial view, so I really want people to be looking at each other, looking at the body and the movement of the mouth, and then we help to optimize that as much as possible. With the voice, if the voice gets soft, we do just what Paul is doing. Say hi, Paul.
Hi.
Yeah, like that. That's simply a portable microphone. It can be as low-tech as that. And so we work on that. We evaluate what muscles are involved, and then we work on that. I did want to move to the assistive and augmentative communication called AAC. This is all in your packet, by the way. We know that people with ALS will often end up with very difficult to understand speech, very difficult to hear voice, and it's very frustrating. And the last thing we want is for somebody to feel like they don't have a way to communicate, manage their world, and stay in charge of those things they need to stay in charge. Our job is to make sure that people have communication from the day they meet us to the last day. And that's what we work on. The technology, what we do today is we first of all start, if there is function, my best friend, the iPad or another tablet. And there are programs if people have full physical function but have a little difficulty with the speech. There are a few apps out there that you can use. The most popular one probably being Verbally. It's simply called Verbally. And Verbally is very easy to use. If you can use an iPad, you can just with your finger tap in what you want to say. It has the words pop up in a predictable fashion, so you don't have to spell everything. You put a letter in and boom, there's a word. And it speaks for you. One of the shortcomings, of course, the iPad isn't always audible, or very audible, and the voice is not pristine, but boy, it is something to get you over a hump. So the Verbally program is one, and Sonoflex. And Kevin has some literature. You have the literature up there on Sonoflex. And there's one that several patients like using. It's called the Proloquo 2. It's okay if you use that. I find it very limited. You want to have a system that lets you say what you want to say and not have to search around for a word that they put in there for you. So I would always recommend that. The systems we use today, and we like to start early. Remember, the goal is optimize and working with energy. And when we work with these computer systems that we're going to demonstrate shortly, that takes some energy. So the sooner people get in and get introduced to it, and we get them going on it, they become very, very quickly able to use these systems. And these are systems that you can use with looking at it, called eye gaze, or blinking the eyes, or sometimes just moving your head. There's a little dot right here on the head, and it talks to an infrared device, and that works just like a mouse. It's called a head mouse. And that's if you have a lot of good control of the head. So to learn those things takes time, and we like to have people learn it and develop the language and the ability with it. So as speech and voice changes, and you have to depend on it more, you already have the skill, and again, there's not a glitch. We're not using up all this energy trying to train if we don't have to. So, on that note, I did want to say something about insurance. I'm so glad that question came up. I was wanting to go, here. Insurance is in front of him, and he had a barber pole next to him with words going down the pole. And he had a secretary, and he would have to look at letters and words to come up with whatever he wanted to come up with. And he was prolific with it. He was really good. I used to see letters to the editor in the paper from Alan. He wasn't letting anything get by him. So at that time, we had one of the first machines that had come out by Prentke Romich, and you pretty much needed an engineering degree to use that thing. There were 100 small squares, and you had to understand linguistics. And you had to put things together phonetically, but he did. So we taught him, and we left it with him. We thought, oh my God, he's 92, he's never seen anything more technologically. He had no skills other than a telephone. We came back 3 days later, this guy, he did it, he mastered it, and he loved it. And at the time, we had to put this flashlight device on his forehead, and he looked like a miner. And he had to trigger it, moving his head with that light, but it worked. And so he wanted one, and at that time, Medicare covered nothing. This is the early 90s, as in zero. The legislation was there, nobody was putting their weight behind it. So I told him, I don't know what to do. It cost $3,000, which was very prohibitive at the time. He said, I don't have the money. I said, well, maybe we need to have a Zippy's Chili fundraiser or something to get going. I don't know what to do. He said to write Senator Daniel Inouye. I said, I have no problem writing to him, and I have no problem having him put his weight behind the legislation. Will it happen fast enough for us? I don't know. And he was busy there doing a response to me. He came out, he said, please remind him, I gave him a B in his first undergrad class because he was arrogant and he needed to learn how to be humble. So I did. I put it in there. A week later, I got a call from one of his aides, and he said, great letter. He'd like to help out, but he can't release state funds to one person. And I said, well, how about we strike something up? Why don't we do it in Alan's name as a gift to the state of Hawaii? And the Hawaii Speech Language Hearing Association will manage it, and Alan will use it for the rest of his life, and then we'll pass it around. And they were glad to do that, and that machine passed around island to island until it was in pieces. Flash forward to Alan's memorial service about a year later, and his wife invited me. It was at the university, and I sat in the back because all these famous people were there, and I was there just wondering why I was there. And she did this glorious presentation on his life. The last few pictures she showed were the pictures of Alan using his device and the two of us talking. After the memorial service, Senator Inouye found me and he said, I just want to know what you look like. And he said, don't ever ask me for money again. And I told him, I'll never bother you again if you put your weight behind the legislation. So the legislation passed, I'm sure not on his shoulders, but it did eventually pass. So there is more effort to get these things covered, but there does need to be more energy. So I just encourage you to contact your legislators. On that note, I want to move to the newest technology, and that's why Kevin is here today. Kevin represents the Tobii ATI company that uses the eye gaze or eye blink technology to communicate. And we worked something up for you. Are you ready? He's just going to use his eyes. He can't cheat. You have to sit on your hands. All right? So, these questions I'm going to ask him are part of a French series, Bouillon de Couture, hosted by Bernard Pivot. And they're based on questions developed by Marcel Proust to look at character. And they're best known to American audiences when James Lipton uses it on the Inside the Actor Studio show. So, ready?
Sorry.
Okay. Boy, he's having problems. Wow. I better perform.
My favorite word is soccer.
What's your least favorite word?
My least favorite is more of a phrase. It's that can't work.
Good for you. Hey, what turns you on, Kevin, creatively, spiritually, and emotionally?
Being around my family.
What turns you off?
Negative people.
My favorite question. What's your favorite curse word? I dared him.
Shit.
What noise or sound do you love?
I love the sound of any kind of music. Would you like to hear some?
Not now. We have to move forward. What sound or noise do you just hate? I heard it.
I hate the sound of ice and glass.
That's right. Oh, it's so tempting if you were from that. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Construction, because I like building stuff.
What profession would you not like to do? It's a vending.
From what we have as far as legislation goes, iPads aren't considered durable medical equipment.
It's a webcast, so I mean.
iPads aren't considered durable medical equipment, and I'm not sure if or when they would be.
And we do have an example. Kevin has this and 2 other devices back there. And one of them is a new tablet device, but unfortunately not yet covered by insurance, maybe.
Any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Okay, I have a really wonderful introduction.
Actually,
Oh, you have one?
it was a question, previous question for Dr. Miles. Dr. Miles, we had Joe from Hawaii had a question for you, which was, what is your vision for your clinic? And if you would like to get that on your board. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Joe, for the question. That's a tricky question. I'm a neuromuscular specialist. I want to see patients who have nerve and muscle diseases, and I would like to spend as much of my clinic time doing that. Kathy and I have talked on many occasions of having multiple specialists be present at the clinic, and hopefully we can start moving forward on that soon. I know we're working with the MDA as well at bringing together a monthly multidisciplinary clinic at our clinic here at Queens. And part of that will involve going to the outer islands on a fairly regular basis. But I think that there's a lot that can be done to develop and move forward and just improve the availability of resources. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I do want to add to that within the past 2 years, I've worked with other speech language pathologists. Kevin has, and 2 of our other vendors have. And we now have people who are trained and functioning at this pretty much the same level we are in Hilo, Kona. The Kona people pick up people from Waimea and the Big Island, on Maui and Kauai. So all of our islands are served, and I've personally gone over to the Big Island and to Molokai when patients on Molokai need help because their hospital is affiliated with us.
But so many people on the Arbor Island, I really feel sorry for them because they don't have this specialist. So there's multidisciplinary team moving island to island, be it once a month, once every other month, would be beneficial to all of them.
And as much as we love to be able to do it that frequently, I don't know that it
I did find
Title slide or something?
All right, 1, 2, 3. That's great, everybody. Don't worry, you're not going to get cut off. Square shoulders. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, can I get everyone to be seated so we can begin? Thank you, everyone. Before we begin, I want to give a special thank you to Russ Sumida, who's helping us webcast this presentation today. Russ was so generous to donate his time, so thank you so much, Russ, to making this available. Not only to the patients in Southern California and Northern California, but also to all the patients in the outer islands. So thank you. Okay, at this time, I would like to introduce you to two women who have worked together to ensure ALS patients have as much independence as possible. We have Julie Seaman, who has been a physical therapist for 14 years with
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay? Okay, great. Just forgive me if my voice gets a little bit shaky. I'm a little nervous, but what we'll do at the end is take questions. So I'll go first and represent occupational therapy, and then Julie will go second and talk a little bit about physical therapy in regards to ALS. Usually everyone asks sort of what's the difference between occupational and physical therapy, so I kind of want to give you a little bit insight into that. With occupational therapists, we focus on facilitating and helping guiding individuals to maximize, or as Kathy said, optimize their potential with independence while keeping them safe. And we use the word ADLs, or activities of daily living. So we're focused on helping a person be able to feed themselves, brush their teeth, grooming, dressing, toileting, bathing, even cooking, laundry, doing all their daily activities. So kind of having them be independent in that arena. So what I want to leave you with today is that I want to provide you with some information so that you can consult and collaborate with your healthcare team, and so that you can optimize and manage your quality of life, and so that you preserve your independence with your functioning. I don't have a PowerPoint, but what I do have is that we put 2 handouts in your packets. And the first handout is going to cover energy conservation tips. And it sort of went along with what Kathy had emphasized, is kind of conserving your energy. That's kind of the key in all of this. So that handout that you have is, has tips, but it may not apply to everybody because everyone has their own progress or what they go through in terms of their ALS and how that affects them. So what that handout is for is sort of just things to consider and look at when you're kind of planning your day or trying to manage your day-to-day needs. So the first area is about rearranging your environment. So first of all, what I tell patients to do is to kind of put things that they use consistently on a daily basis, maybe in easy access. So for example, if you have a favorite dish or cup that you like to use, putting it on the countertop instead of having to go in and out of the shelves, because you don't want to waste or use up that energy to try to bend too low or reach too far up. That will help you. The other thing is to keep in mind is to keep things lighter in terms of as an individual, if you're carrying things instead of heavier, because that uses more energy. So an example that they have down there is using maybe paper plates instead of heavy china. What I think of more of is if you have a heavy mug, instead of using that, maybe the other thing is you want to kind of have a clear pathway, especially from where you're sleeping, the bedroom to the bathroom. No clutter, if you can possibly have that. The other thing that I tell patients to do is put a night light in the bathroom so that they can find their way easier to and from the bathroom. And again, it's a safety consideration. And then, again, Kathy had talked about fatigue being a factor. So you might want to strategically place seating so that if you're feeling fatigue within your home, you can just sit and rest. And you don't have to hurry to try to complete something or try to find a place to rest quickly. The next area is to try to eliminate unnecessary effort, or we kind of refer to this as simplifying your work or work simplification. So if you can sit to do an activity versus standing, that will help. It almost actually conserves about 25% of your energy just to sit to do a task. So it can be even meal prep, washing the dishes, even something as putting on a pair of pants, seated rather than stepping into it, conserves your energy, okay? Another thing is to use adaptive equipment, and it's nothing you have to buy necessarily, but maybe using an electric razor instead of having a straight edge, because a lot of that motion can kind of expend your energy. Using an electric toothbrush, the Sonicare, that can be helpful. Using for the phone, instead of holding the phone to your ear, you can use a headset instead of holding the phone. The other thing is using a rolling cart, maybe instead of carrying things, trying to use a cart to kind of just push things along can make things easier. And she's nodding her head, so she can relate to that. The other thing I found is even backpacks are easier versus than handbags, because then it uses your whole body instead of expending your weight to carry on one arm or the other. And then it's always closer to your body. The other one is to just simply think of a way that you can simplify a task and still have the same outcome. So for example, if you're gonna wash dishes, you might wanna soak your dishes and then not have to really rigorously clean them, but then also let them air dry, or using, if you have with your automatic dishwasher also. Okay. Sometimes it takes a little bit though of just kind of changing in your thoughts the way you used to do things to make things a little simpler for you. I think the next area is to plan ahead. And in talking with my colleagues, I think this is the #1 area that we stress to individuals. And so what I mean by that is, in your daily routine, if you can plan rest breaks, what you'll do is then you'll have more energy to do the things that you want to accomplish. So what we've seen is patients, they might feel really good one day, and so they're gonna go into the garden, they're gonna wash the car, they're gonna and staying away from maybe the hours of 12 to 3 o'clock. Because then that can really take a lot of energy, and maybe you won't want to complete the task that you planned for that day. And I think the last area is prioritizing. And I think this one is maybe a little more challenging because it's adapting. So for example, if gardening is something you really like to do, then you prioritize that, and then maybe you hire or have your caregivers or your family and friends do more like the household tasks for you, or vice versa. So what I'd like to do is just go over, lastly, I brought up some what we call durable medical equipment. I have a handout of the local medical supply companies here in Hawaii, and on the outer islands also. And so what I wanted to do is show you a few things. Okay, first, so this is a feeding device, and it's just called a universal cup. And what you do is just wrap it around your hand, and then you stick the utensil in. So you don't have to hold or grip the utensil, but you can just kind of have the cuff over to be able to feed yourself. So it kind of adapts the utensil for you. The other thing that can be helpful is a reacher. So again, reaching high or reaching and bending low, that takes a lot of energy. So this can help with dressing. I've had patients learn how to put on their shorts or take off their socks and all of that, and just accessing things instead of reaching for the floor. The other things that I wanted to show you was maybe investing in a piece of equipment that will help you when you're having a good day, and then equipment also when you're not having such a good day. So for example, I have a drop arm bedside commode here. And what's nice about this is maybe during the day you can put it over in the bathroom over your toilet, and then in the evening, if you've had kind of gone through your day and you're a little bit more tired, you can just get up from the bedside to the toilet. And so what's nice about this one is so the arm drops down this way so that you can have a clear path from the bed to the commode. And then the last, I think mostly it can give you some ideas that things that are already in your home that you might have and that you can use to kind of increase your independence and your safety with your daily living. Okay, lastly, I found this on the internet. It
is a method of becoming stronger, working on getting from point A to point B, managing your situations, and helping you to achieve your ultimate independence. Therefore, today I'm going to discuss transfers and pressure sore prevention. I also tucked some things in your packets. The transfers, not so much of a description. I'm probably just going to review them. That it's basically a transfer is how do you get from point A to point B? How do you get out of bed? Take a stand pivot to a wheelchair, or walking with an assisted device of maybe a cane or walker or something like that. So those are all kind of just basic ways to move to and from. What I'd like to look at is the safety of those movements. So I want you to consider if your body and the muscles aren't exactly working as you intend them to be, and you have in your mind, you have this idea of you're going to get up and go do this, but you might find you're a little bit weaker one day, or Balance becomes a concern. So basically with safety, you want to just think about what you're doing before you do it. So leading in with Wendy, planning is a big key. So with her activities of daily living, or you're going into the kitchen to get something to eat, think about how you're going to get there, or what's the shortest route, what's the safest route, and do I need someone with me to get that safely, or can I ask other people? So there's various transfers as far as like coming out from the bed, standing up, and then walking. You may need different assist levels. So if someone is with you, they can offer that aid for as long as they're safe with themselves as well as helping with you. Sorry, I must have said safe about 5 times. So basically, you want to be able to achieve where you want to go when you want to do it. So that's basic transfers. I'll discuss some of the equipment up here in a moment. I wanted to also cover body mechanics or pressure sore prevention. There's 2 handouts as well. It's requiring, with the pressure sore prevention, as you spend time sitting more than being standing, the bony parts of your body, so your we call them the sit bones, your back, the backs of your heels, are put through pressure from just the weight of your body sitting. To avoid pressure, let me back up. Pressure to your body causes a restriction in blood flow to the muscles and the skin tissue. So there's a potential for skin breakdown, and that can lead to some catastrophic problems later on. So it's best to prevent that. And pressure sore prevention when you're sitting can be as simple as to try to just push into your seat, kind of lift up your hips. If you're not able to lift up your hips, then simply just squeezing your butt muscles together can do that as well. So I think I'll get to the demonstration. One of the vendors from National Seating and Mobility, Frank, brought this chair, and it's got many features focusing towards that pressure sore prevention. So with a toggle of the joystick here, I can make this chair, I think it went to some. So, I think we're to the point of some questions. Yes.
Do you recommend any of those seat cushions that like aid crate
Thank you very much. I knew there was something that, the whole pressure sore thing. Yes, I recommend, there's the J cushions are very nice with the gel inside. I would recommend, if you're just shopping on your own and not working with a therapist, the foam, not exactly the memory foam, but kind of a foam that you might find in Target or Kmart, but a lot of the therapists work with some other very nice cushions that you could get through maybe possibly even insurance.
Is it better to go through a medical equipment like ACE?
I would think so, because then you might have a guarantee on those equipments or a way to replace if certain things within a certain time frame don't work out.
What about for pillows too? Would you have any recommendation for that as well? Because I have trouble sleeping.
Right, to keep your neck in the alignment. That's a tough one, because I do like those, that's where I would maybe go with more that memory foam or that kind of contoured pillow. I think I've advised patients for like towel rolls or different positioning with your regular pillow. Do you find it to be more when you're like on your back, or
Yeah, on my
doesn't
back.
matter the position? Yeah.
Yeah.
So often on your back, you might want the pillow to be closer to your neck versus on your head itself.
Julie, I have a question from the internet. Are there any, this is from Ben in Oahu, are there any resources to loan equipment to patients who cannot afford them if they don't live in Oahu?
Good question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben was from Molokai.
I think we've heard of some, there was a lending library, maybe with MDA, but I'm not, yeah.
Does anybody in the audience know?
Anyone, true.
Yeah, so depending on, you know, what it is, can they hear me? Please? With the MDA equipment closet, we are sometimes able to get some of the items that we have out to the neighbor islands.
Shall I reiterate?
Sure.
She shared that the MBA lending closet.
Adjustable, and it just on the bottom, you just kind of adjust what you need. You would have to raise the lid and then put that over. Sometimes you have to watch out because the septic tank is behind, so this piece here might fit. But most of them fit right over.
Would you recommend that people ask therapists first before they spend a lot of money on a cushion or a seating system, just so that they know the best bang for their buck?
I would definitely recommend that. So, and to get to see a therapist, talk with your primary care physician or house, or, yeah, internist doctor, and they should be able to refer you.
One more question from the internet. It's from Josie in Oahu. What are some recommendations for preserving muscle strength with ALS?
I will go with Wendy, how she began, the energy conservation. So use your muscles when you absolutely need them. In the meantime, you don't want to do any overuse. So if you do an exercise, say even just a wrist curl, you do limit it to 5 or 10 repetitions. Don't be doing like 30 and adding some weight and things like that.
I have the same answer. It's just that if instead of the exercise, if you wanted to be able to do gardening or your hobbies, actually they act as kind of therapeutic exercise for you, and it's you being able to be independent and being able to do something that you would like to do. So I think energy conservation is kind of the key. So if you can break down a task and not have to do it all at one time, but put the rest breaks in there, then it'll help you complete that task, but maybe over like a longer course of time.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
The therapy, because of the weakness, does it actually help that you do the therapy? And does it, what does it do really? Does it keep the same level of strength, or does it keep you from getting stiff, or, you know, what does it really do?
Very good question. It's kind of a combination of that. You're maintaining the muscle tone, but you don't want to over fatigue and do too much. But at the same time, the range of motion is affected. If you're not moving and you're a little bit worried to move that you'll lose it, we want to try to not enforce that. But it's a little bit, use it, but in moderation.
So it's like stretching exercises would...
Very beneficial. I would say, and the stretching exercises you can probably not, well, as a therapist, I never tell you you cannot overdo, because a lot of my patients will overdo. But just, yeah, stretching is excellent.
Thank you.
So they're going to be around for the rest of the program. So if there are more questions that come up to you, we'll all be here afterwards and we can chat informally. This was the world of ALS research not that long ago. I understand about half of what she says. I guarantee you, you're going to understand 100% of what I say, but I might not be telling you 100% of what you might really want to know, because I can't pronounce the words. You'll understand soon. And so what you're going to get really more is a layperson's interpretation of what's happening with ALS. And you're going to get a primer around what's the ALS Association's job and activity around ALS. And so we're going to start there, and then we're going to work into taking you through the ALS Association's research program, what it looks like, because there are lots of organizations doing research around ALS. And so I want you to understand our research program. And then at the end, we're going to cover a few of the areas that the ALS Association is focusing on. They're the ones that are easiest for me to talk about, and that's why you're going to be getting to hear about them today. And I will be taking no questions about ALS. I'll take all questions, but if I don't know the answer, we have to agree that I will get you the answer, but it might not be today. But I'm happy to do it. So you'll remember from earlier on, 3 mission priorities: care services, advancing public policy, and advancing the search for a cure. And one of the things that distinguishes the ALS Association is that our program is global. The ALS Association has no laboratories. So we're not here to advance our research. We're not here to keep our labs open. We're not here to fund our scientists. We're here to find the best research in the world, no matter where it is, and fund those people in their labs to do the best work possible. So what does a global research program look like? Well, every dot represents a laboratory somewhere around the world. And so you can see we're not constrained to the United States, and you can see we have some challenges to conquer in terms of bringing ALS research to the Hawaiian Islands. And it's certainly an objective of ours, because I know that many of you would like to be participating in research, and we want to bring that opportunity to you. As we discussed earlier, the cure is going to be found where? Those of you who are awake during that part? Come on. It's the end of the day. I'm the last speaker. You've eaten, you're tired, but you must remember this, right? Where is the cure going to be found? Through research that's happening with patients. That research with patients in the United States is happening at every one of these pinpoints. These are our clinical research sites. They are ALSA certified centers, they're MDA certified centers. They're part of what's called a NEALS clinical network. NEALS stands for Northeastern ALS Research Network. It's something that the ALS Association funded to establish state-of-the-art clinical research groups who meet a standardized criteria so that when a research company wants to advance a clinical trial, there is a network of sites already in place, already with established protocols, so that the data collection process and the execution of that research can be trusted, and that the data that comes out of it can be trusted. And so sites actually have to go through a rigorous application process to be certified as a NEAL site. And if you want to know where clinical research is happening in the United States, it's happening at these dots around the country. So what does our program look like? This pie chart, you see lots of labels here. We're focused on genetics. Put a drug into a human being until you've proven it's safe for an animal. And animal models of ALS help us actually understand the disease mechanism and give us clues as to whether or not something works. Now you'll remember from earlier on, we have done a spectacular job of curing mice of ALS. Hasn't really helped us cure any humans yet, but animal models of ALS, until very recently, were the only way that we really had to understand whether or not a drug works on ALS. We'll talk about more about that in an hour. Kidding. So we fund and organize large global consortia around genetics and biomarkers. You'll remember I said that our federal public policy efforts generate about $85 million a year in ALS research funding. A good question would be, what happens to that money? Who decides where it goes? Well, there's actually a committee of NIH, CDC, DOD, all the various government research departments that are conducting ALS research, and there are many, to ensure that there is no overlap, no duplication of effort. There's a committee where all of those projects come and get screened. And the chief scientist of the ALS Association is the chair of that committee. And so not only through your advocacy efforts are you generating $85 million a year in ALS research funding, you are also supporting the process that determines how that money gets spent. And that's key. And some of it gets spent through these large consortia focusing on genetics and biomarkers, supporting risky research with little preliminary data. Given all the failure, it's not hard to imagine that ALS research is risky business. It's expensive, and so far it hasn't yielded very much, which means pharmaceutical companies are pretty skittery when it comes to opportunities to invest in research. And so money has to be put in the early stage, high-risk research in order to prove some efficacy early on in order to get people interested in ALS research. And so the ALS Association created a postdoctoral fellowship program to attract the youngest, newest, brightest minds into the field of ALS research. So what has all this accomplished? Well, as you're going to see in a minute, we've discovered lots more genes for ALS. We have more investigators than ever before. And the best example of this that I can give you is at the Department of Defense. So we go and you go and lobby Congress, and Congress gives $7 to $10 million a year for ALS research at the Department of Defense. An RFP is issued to solicit applications for that research. This past year, there were hundreds of research projects submitted. Of those hundreds, there were 70 that were approved for funding. They were strong, legitimate science answering important questions. With the money that was allocated from Congress, we could fund 3 to 5 of those projects, which means we are leaving a ton of really good ALS research on the table simply because we haven't yet raised enough money to fund it. That was not the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago. when you are struggling to find people to do ALS research. We have a very motivated field of terrific scientists that are producing really good scientific discovery opportunities, and the obstacle in the way is only funding. We were the first ALS organization to embrace translational research and develop public-private partnerships for ALS. The first, now here's one of those words, now you'll understand why there isn't a lot more of this in this presentation. Antisense, for neurological diseases tried in clinical trials for ALS. What does that mean? Blocking the production of a mutant protein that causes SOD1 ALS. It's gene therapy. And it's being done at a lab in San Diego and with Richard Smith, who is a very talented ALS clinician and scientist, and a private company. And they are advancing this antisense technology. It means we now can create human models of ALS. And we can try drugs, not on mouse ALS, or zebrafish ALS, or worm ALS. We can try it on your ALS. And what happens when we find something that works on your ALS? What happens in the big pharma, ready to invest money in a really effective treatment for ALS? Is it hard to raise that money in the face of being able to say, this works on people? It doesn't get hard at all. Support for the development of surgical techniques that led to the first stem cell trial for ALS in the United States. These are stem cell implants. Now, I think there was a question earlier on about stem cell implants. They've been around for a long time. They've been happening in Mexico. They've been happening in the Eastern Bloc. They've been happening in China. They've been happening all over the place. None of them are subject to the rigors of peer-reviewed scientific research. None of them. None of them have shown any consistent efficacy results. All of them are terrific fundraisers. If any of them work, the ALS community is a resilient, active, communicative network of people. If there was something working out of any of those places, we'd have already known about it because you would have told us, and you'd all be going. Some people are going, and they're coming back disappointed. Some people are going, and they're coming back feeling better. But those aren't replicable results, and they're not part of a double-blind clinical trial. So, the ALS Association was part of creating the surgical technique required for an FDA-approved research program for stem cell implants. And we increased the number of trials through our Treat ALS Clinical Trials Network, all those pins, dots around the United States. Now, we don't do this by ourselves to be able to offer diaphragm pacer inserts. And the funding for that effort to prove that diaphragm pacing work is a collaboration between the ALS Association and the MDA. So now we're going to start moving into how do these therapies get developed. So there are tools that we use for research. One is having a model system. That would be like zebrafish. That would be like the animals, mouse models. And the other is biomarkers, which we don't have, but we are working on. And what you see moving across these arrows from target identification and early discovery through clinical management is what we call a bed-to-bedside continuum of ALS research. And some of it happens in labs, and as it moves forward, it moves out into the patient community, which you can see in the preclinical studies, clinical trials, and finally, clinical management. Now, these genes that we've discovered, back in 1993, I think it might have been, SOD1 was discovered. That was the very first target for ALS. The question, why has it taken so long to find any thing to work on ALS is because we can't figure out what it is. We can't figure out what causes it. Well, when we discovered the SOD1 gene mutation that runs through many families, it gave us a target to see, can we impact SOD1? And back in the early 90s, and before the early 90s, there wasn't one. Well, what's it like today? Now we have over 20 genes, and you can see that most of them have been discovered very recently. This gives us lots to talk about, lots of targets. And the most interesting one is the one way out in 2011, 2012 called C9orf72. It's a very elegant name for a gene mutation. Happens to be the first gene mutation that occurs in families with ALS running through it, but also occurring in people with sporadic ALS, where there was no prior history. So now we have a target, not just for, because the other question is, how come all the research is always focused on familial ALS? I don't have familial ALS. In fact, 90% of the people with ALS don't have familial ALS. Why are we only looking at familial ALS? It's because those were the only targets we had. Well, now, C9orf72 gives us a target for sporadic ALS, but you can see the discovery. Spending has increased dramatically, but the blue line, except for that spike in 1997, which I don't know what happened that year, that 50 plus new drugs got approved. For most of the rest of the years, no matter how much we're spending on drug discovery in this country, we're only approving, between 10 and 30 new drugs. Doesn't matter if we were spending $5 to $10 billion generating 10 to 30 new drugs. Spending $50 billion a year, still generating 10 to 30 new drugs. So we have to get smarter about how we're investing our drug development money. Okay, here goes the hard part. What's the latest research news? Biomarkers. I talked a little bit about biomarkers. You can read that for yourself if you like. I'm not going to read it for you. That was just my clue here to say, Fred, talk about biomarkers and their importance. Many of you know the challenge of an ALS diagnosis. It comes after months of trying to have it be something else that it turns out not to be. If we had a biomarker, a blood test, something we can observe, a change we can see, we would be able to diagnose it quicker, start treating it quicker, and certainly our objective is to get people into the clinic as soon as possible and have them move out of their general practitioner's offices and into our multidisciplinary clinics where the experts around ALS are. And so this is just one project, happens to be in Buenos Aires, Argentina, that's focused on biomarkers. And a biomarker is a substance used as an indicator of normal or pathogenic processes or pharmacologic responses to a therapeutic intervention. I could not say any of that off the top of my head. But that's what it is. And so we're looking in this project at the presence of antibodies in ALS patients that aren't there in healthy patients, in search of a biomarker. And the other thing is, I can provide all of this to all of you, grab my business card, say, send me all the stuff you've got on research, and I can give you tons of reading. I find that people with ALS know way more about research than I do, because they're reading all of it. And I'm happy to provide you with more. Modeling ALS using induced pluripotent stem cells. This is the game changer. This technology didn't exist just a few years ago, and as a result of using this technology, we can now create your ALS. One of the questions people ask all the time is, gee, how come sometimes in people it starts in their throat, and how come it starts in their hands, some it's in their feet, some they lose swallowing first, some they lose the ability to walk first, some people are walking and running and riding bikes, but they have no use of their arms and hands. Well, that's telling us there are different processes operating that we have never had a way to understand. But there have been two developments that have changed this entirely. One is being able to create your ALS in a dish and try things on it and compare what might work for you versus what might work for somebody else. The way clinical trials are structured right now, a drug could work on a very small percentage of the ALS population in that trial, but the number might be statistically irrelevant and the result would be lost. You could have a drug that works and not know it. This prevents that. This helps us take the ALS of people where it starts as bulbar. Take ALS that starts in lower motor neurons. Take ALS that starts in their extremities and really start to look at what makes them different. Genome to do the same thing. We're going to be looking for genetic markers of diseases that have not yet 5 minutes. Oh my God. Okay. But this part is really, this is magical to me. That we're going to start being able to see, our medical centers are going to start collecting our genome. It's going to be part of our medical record, and they're going to be running diagnostics on it and looking at genetic mutations that they will see before symptoms are ever expressed, and through gene therapy, they will be treated and cured. That is going to change the face of medicine. And it starts with induced pluripotent stem cells, and the tool that's going to help that process is the driving the cost of full genome sequencing down. We can now do it, I think, for about $1,000 a patient. I think it probably was like $100,000 a person not that long ago. Which brings us to gene therapy. Modifying genes, this one in Belgium, using animal models of the genetic mutation ALS FUS, and finding ways to treat that ALS through gene therapy. I'd say a lot more about that, but I don't have time, I'm sorry. This one, disease modeling at Harvard. Here we go. Directed differentiation of upper motor neurons from human IPS, induced pluripotent cells, for disease modeling. The search for a cure. Not just by participating in a trial, but by actively being engaged in driving money into the search. And the only reason that this happened, and this is just one of many that have been funded from the $500,000 that we generated, but I wanted to show you the opportunity that you have. Not just to create great public policy, not just to create great patient care, but you have an opportunity to create great research and be the ones, be the pioneers. We are pioneers. We are discovering the new world, and we're doing it together. And I wanted you to see what that looks like. I see you, and I'm on my last slide. So if you want more information about ALS research, you can come to the Golden West Chapter's website and click on the Research tab. You can read in great detail the 100 different projects that we're currently, the ALS Association is currently funding. If you want information about clinical trials that are going on, you can go there too. And if you want to talk to somebody about specific trials, there's the resource there. I don't expect you to write this down, but I invite you, if you don't remember this, and you're one of the 6 people on the planet that doesn't know how to use Google, I can send it to you easily and give you the means to explore the opportunities that are available to you. All of this happens under the ALS Association's Treat ALS program, and none of it happens without the ALS community getting fully engaged in it. Any questions?
Fred, I have some questions from the internet. First one is from Alana in Honolulu, and she said, "You did an amazing job. How do you keep this all straight? How can one person like me keep this all straight? Are there any resources to help understand this stuff?"
Well, Alana, thank you. The check is in the mail. Yeah, I don't know how to keep it all straight, and I don't try on my own. This is not something any of us has to do by ourselves. We do pretty much monthly webinars, just better than this one, where you can hear directly from the people doing the research. You can ask them questions about all the stuff that I can't pronounce. And over time, it will begin to make sense to you. And so I invite you to get on our email list so that we can notify you of every research seminar, so we can send you the research updates when they come out. I have my own personal list of people that anytime I get a research update, I blast it out to people who've said to me, you know what, when you hear something interesting about research, you know, I'd appreciate it if you forward it to me. So you don't have to keep it straight. We're keeping it straight for you, and there are opportunities for you to get that information, and they're just a mouse click away.
Do they talk about
To do more of, and the help we need to provide more of. And it's also a way for me to do what I'm doing here today, which is try and engage you in this terrific battle we're all in.
One more question from the internet. This is from Stan from Santa Clara, California. He wants to know, when will stem cell treatments really be available to patients?
As soon as they are proven effective by the FDA. The next stem cell trial that's happening is actually going to be happening at Cedars-Sinai. They received one of the other public policy initiatives was a $3 billion stem cell research initiative that was passed in California, and California taxpayers agreed to invest that. And it's a 10-year project that they're about halfway through, and Cedars-Sinai just got $18 million to run a stem cell implant trial. Unlike what was happening at Emory, this one, instead of focusing on motor neurons, is going to be focusing on astrocytes, focusing on creating neuroprotection within the environment where the motor neurons are living, is how I would describe that, Dr. Miles. Creating neuroprotection so that the motor neurons don't die. And I was actually, one of the other things we did in California was we created a consortium of ALS researchers, and we brought all the California ALS researchers together. And I heard Clive Svensson, who's one of the world's top stem cell researchers, say in this group of scientists, you know, I think it might be in the axons. I think there might be something in the environment rather than in the neurons. And I heard him say that, and it was a challenging idea at the time because the focus was myopically on stem cells, and he was thinking in another direction, and his colleagues challenged him. Well, now, 3-4 years later, he just got $18 million to try his theory. And as soon as these implant trials prove effective, they will happen more and more. It's a real challenge. The pathways that these neurons follow are long. People tell me I'm tall. That means that the neurons, I'll be back as soon and as often as necessary until we have, in fact, together created a world without ALS. And as you can see today, it takes a lot of people to do that, and we are grateful to have been included in that group. And we want to continue to be included and continue to offer what we can to your battle against ALS and everyone else's. So thank you for that, and you're right. Today has been a terrific day with talented and generous people, and I'm very glad that it's resonated strongly. That's a great place for me to end and say again, thank you to Queen's Hospital and everyone who made this possible. I think Giovanna might have some last final words, but on behalf of the Golden West chapter, we're very grateful to be here. We're very grateful for your support, and we hope to see all of you tomorrow for a big party that's happening in a big park. It's called the Walk to Defeat ALS, and it will be the thing that catapults us into sort of the next wave of what we do against ALS here in Hawaii. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.
This concludes our presentation today. First of all, I would like to once again thank Karen Seth and Dr. Miles here at Queens Medical Center for allowing us this wonderful opportunity for being here. I also want to mention a few things. If you are an ALS patient, it is really important that you sign up for and participate in the ALS registry. There is flyers at the back table at the chapter booth. Please take a flyer, read all about this ALS registry. We really need you to participate so they can continue to do research on ALS. And then the last thing, if you are a veteran, please make sure you contact your local VA as well, because there's lots of wonderful benefits for veterans and ALS. Okay, well, thank you. There's still some refreshments here. Again, please visit the vendors at the chapter booth. Please take any materials you would like. If you want my business card and you'd like me to email you any of the presentations,